Good evening. Good to be on here with everyone. As I put in the chat on YouTube, I will wait until I have confirmation from someone that the sound is working. This is because when I was doing Fingers and Their Safety Energy Locks in German, June 7th to 11th, I had to change a few settings because it was going from OBS into Zoom. This is nothing you need to know. I just want to make sure that the settings we have today are working. They should be working. And I will check the chat now, and if they're working, I'll be right back with you. Good. Great. So the sound is live. A note to members in the online study circle or members in Reimagining Pulse Listening with lifetime access. I have set the second date for our live meetup, the live on-camera meetup for members, where we all talk and exchange. That is not public, and that's recorded just for members. It will be Thursday of next week, and I don't know whether an announcement went out to everyone when I said that yesterday in Kajabi communities. But just in case, I'll be sending an announcement out to everyone tomorrow morning. Now, let's land here. Take a moment and close your eyes. Feel your body resting. Feel your energy settling into the moment. That is, if you perceived that your mind or your energy otherwise was somewhere else in some other place and time where you were today, earlier on, let it just gather and settle until you get a sense in your body that you've returned, so to speak. And let your sensory awareness move down into the center of your chest. Or as Loch Kelly puts it, Loch like the lakes in Scotland, L-O-C-H, Kelly, well, you know how that's spelled. As Loch Kelly puts it on his app, Effortless Mindfulness, unhook local awareness from thinking. He uses that phrase all the time. And what he calls local awareness, I think, is what I've been calling sensory awareness. For many people, just realizing that awareness doesn't have to be latched onto thinking is revolutionary. If you just go into sensing any part of your body from within, that's actually a very simple and plain experience that you'll be having. So unhook local awareness from thinking, to put it in Locke's words, or let your sensory awareness depart from the head and disconnect from your thinking and mental process and descend to the center of your chest. Feel your chest from within. And while you simply stay there with your embodied sensory awareness, while thinking becomes secondary, well, it's still happening. It's just secondary because it's not hijacked all of your attention. With your sensory awareness centered at the center of your chest, while you feel your chest from within, ask yourself, what is here right now? And staying at the center of your chest with sensory awareness, don't look for a mental answer to the question, what is here right now? Instead, let your being as it is composed right now, let your combined sensibility of the moment perceive what's there right now, and from among all the possible objects of perception, inner or outer, simply allow your sensory awareness to be drawn to what draws it. Be as present as possible with sensory awareness in your chest, while being as open and choiceless as possible, and allowing your attention to go exactly to what calls it. When we allow this while the mind is hyperactive, it's a very dangerous thing to do. Well, dangerous only in the sense that we'll be drawn to one thing and then the next and then the next and then the next. But if you can feel your energy, your sensory awareness centered in your chest, it is not likely that that will happen. Instead, if it isn't thinking, if it isn't the thinking mind that goes to objects of perception, feel how the movement happens. Feel the quality of that movement. And feel the kind of intimate contact that you are making in the plainest possible sense with the object of perception. Intimate, because you're feeling it closely, very closely. In the plainest possible sense, because no giving of, oh wow, special meaning is happening. Maybe your attention went to the hum of wheels on the street nearby. If thinking doesn't comment it, if local awareness is still centered in your chest, that hum will be both very non-invasive and somehow interesting, just plainly there, just something to be perceived, not commented on. For the most part, anything you perceive in this way will almost seem friendly. That is, until you label it, then you start liking and disliking. But when you are just hearing, seeing, sensing, smelling, tasting, because this very plain and direct sensory attention took you there, and there was no plan for you to prefer any one thing over another. This is the kind of organic contact you'll be experiencing. What is here right now? If the renewed asking of that question draws your attention yet to some other object of perception, let that happen. And feel how each time it's no big deal. And there is that very plain, very direct intimacy with what you are perceiving. Both no big deal and so familiar. If you practice this more often, you may find it's a sort of mini vacation in the middle of the day. It's a mini moment of time out from preferring and choosing. And yet it's time off from preferring and choosing without meaning in the slightest that you've gone indifferent, sloppy, absent-minded, hypotonic. I mean, you know, that your tone has somehow collapsed. You're there, you're very much awake, ordinary, in an open-hearted sort of way, to quote another sentence of Locke's that I love, Locke Kelly. Open-hearted in an ordinary sort of way is something he says of the states that he guides one towards. So that is the key skill we've been practicing this month in our journey of reimagining pulse listening. From the first month, we've been focusing on listening, 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 and staying in the listening, but different aspects of listening, different qualities of listening. And this month, we are talking about organ function, energy in the pulses, which organ pulse is felt where. The skill that I just mentioned is key, because if you listen to the pulses with a preconceived idea of what sort of pulse should be calling your attention, if you have an inner hierarchy of, well, if it's loud, that's one thing, but if it's hardly perceptible, now that, you know, if you have any kind of hierarchy of what should be calling out to you, rather than just being there in the way you just practiced and allowing what speaks to you speak to you. Listen to your pulses if you're familiar with how to do that. Your sensory awareness centered at the chest goes out to your fingertips. Can you manage right there at the fingertips to have no preference, no choice beforehand, but rather allow the kind of magnetism of where is my attention going? Where is my attention organically being drawn? And if so, can you stay in the intimacy of that moment and develop trust that this is what you go with? This is what you go with. This last description will also be useful for me to answer the very first question I got for this evening from Jana. Before I go into the questions, let me just mention again to anyone who may be new to this or not yet on board for the journey of reimagining pulse listening. The course isn't going anywhere. When we're finished with this 5-month journey, it'll still be available for lifetime access. It's just that right now it is available at 350 euros. It'll be going up to 380 once we're done. So, you know, if this is calling to you, give it some thought while you can still save 30 euros on it. All right, so Jana says, hello Matthias, my question is, when I first hear 5th depth for the texture, then on second hearing 2nd depth under the fingertips, what do I choose, I wonder? And later Jana wrote a second email clarifying just what she had meant. And I will answer the question both ways, the way I had originally understood it, and the way she later clarified she meant it, which is actually on second reading, pretty clear in the first wording as well. But since last month I had insisted heavily that if you want to make pulse textures a reality that speaks to you, you need to keep your sensory awareness very much at the fingertips, because it is only at the fingertips that you will feel the textures. And if you do stay at the fingertips, you will feel them very clearly. So that's why, you know, under the fingertips 2nd depth, I originally took that to mean texture. So let's say that's what somebody asks me. If I'm listening to the pulses, first I'm hearing a 5th depth texture, but then I think, no, I think this is 2nd depth texture. What would I choose? Now, again, this is not the question Jana asked, but it's a good hypothetical to answer. There's a double answer. In general, I would say go with what you heard first, because generally, first I thought it was so-and-so, and then I thought, well, maybe not. That's generally the chatting mind, and I would ignore that. Of course, there can be situations where you clearly know you feel very grounded in having felt, say, a 5th depth texture, and you feel very grounded in having been able to observe how it shifted and changed to something else now. Then I would go with that, if I have that strong sense of being grounded. And now to the question, the way Jana did mean it. So in listening to the pulses for textures, which is how does the pulse feel when it hits my fingertip or fingertips? And then in terms of where the pulses are beating, under which finger, superficial and or deep, do I feel them? Do I find them most worthy of attention? That's where 2nd depth came in. So on organ function level, large intestine and small intestine, that's left index finger, superficial and deep, showed up. So which should I do? Now, there are a couple of ways of answering that. The first is the feeling exercise we just did. Anytime, not just in the context of pulses, you're confronted with a choice and you're thinking, could go this way, I could go that way, I could choose this flow, I could choose that flow, this level, that level, and so on. one of the things that you can do is, as you scan your possibilities in your mind, as you feel your way towards those possibilities, if with one of the things you feel, something in your body settles, something inside just calms down or smiles at the thought of, oh, I think I'll go with fifth depth. Oh, I think I'll go with second depth. That's one possibility. It's the royal path, I would say, trusting your feeling when you can stay that centered, when you can stay that embodied, when there's no nervousness of the mind kicking in. That's a good one to follow. If the mind needs to have a bit more of a say, then it's good to simply know on information level that texture is on the unmanifest level, or thought level as Mary called it. But by thought she didn't mean inner speech. She didn't mean what most of us mean when we say thought. Most of us, when we speak of thinking or thought, we think of linguistically formulated thought, as Noam Chomsky would put it. In other words, thinking that has words and sentences to it. That's clearly a matter of 14, whereas Mary placed thinking on 13 level, and she meant the inner processes that are actually a lot closer to feeling, sensing, desiring, divining than they are to thinking in that verbal sense. So, back to pulse textures. How the pulse feels at your fingertip tells you something about impulse level then, to use a different word from thought level. It's a very delicate level of what's moving the person right now, what's moving the person right now on the invisible, unmanifest, that is, thought, feeling, impulse level. This often precedes the manifestation. What you feel on organ function level, in this example it was large intestine and lung, is already on the manifesting level. So it's more in the now, whereas what you heard in the texture could lie in the future in terms of its manifestation. And it's going on right now on a subtle level and will manifest its fruit probably only later, which, often makes it a good idea to work with that now, and then the thing that you're feeling brewing in the pulses, so to speak, won't even manifest. However, you balance that decision with some reflection on, well, manifest, unmanifest, what's the person's request? What did they come with? What did they come for? What is it they're expressing they want? And more importantly, if you can distinguish those two things, what do you as a practitioner, when you are grounded, etc., feel is the most manageable and useful next step for this person? Something on that basic, what energy or impulse is happening with me right now level, which is more causal than the next level down, but also more abstract. Or the, okay, this is what's in the middle of manifesting, this is in the middle of being worked out, so let me go to that level. It would depend in my own practice. Whenever I can, I follow the which level is drawing my attention organically thing that we learned in the beginning. Thank you for that question, and thank you for sending it twice, because it gave me the opportunity to answer several possible cases, which is really helpful. Taj. Hello, Matthias. It's been quite entertaining this past month to listen for what is calling me from the wrists. So that's the application of the exercise, or some variation of it that we just learned here. Move to the body and at least start the corresponding organ flow and come back to the wrists and recheck. Like taking orders from my body instead of from my mind or from a book. And to be perfectly clean, yes, I still sometimes do a flow I want to do, whether it shows up in the wrist or not. Well, congratulations on that, because listening to the pulses should not ever become the dictatorship of the pulses. That's something I'm not using those words, dictatorship of the proletariat of the pulses is not what I say in the course, but I do say that listening, it is the quality of listening that creates and holds and maintains the space for change. So we would slam that space shut if we said, oh, the pulses said so, we must do it. That kind of literalism totally takes us off the path of practicing Jin-Shin-Jyutsu in the alive fashion we need to practice it in, if it is to be not Japanese method to be followed by the rule, but creator's art, or the art of primal aliveness through an alive human being. So congratulations on when the inspiration of the moment takes you to, I'll do the flow I want to do and I'll finish it if I want to instead. Next paragraph. For the rest of my jumper cable days, she writes, at the risk of asking you to violate Roth rule number 1, stay in perception mode, I'm wondering about the order of transformation when I begin to jump a cable of flow on my body. How dare you violate Roth rule number 1? I am so disappointed. Does the very some very good questions following. Does the very act of jumper cabling initiate the transformation cycle, or is the cycle always going on and we tap in wherever it is? Yes and yes. So the order of transformation is always going on. If the person's alive, and if they weren't alive, well, they wouldn't be on your table, right? So transformation is always going on. And we're always coming into the middle of some process that's already going on. And there's a different story of transformation that starts upon contact. You know, just like in conversation, a person may already be in the middle of thinking something. If you join them and they start sharing their thoughts with you, while of course they'll be continuing their train of thought in a certain manner, they will certainly continue it along a different track because there's now an interaction. So back to touching and jumper cabling, there's always something that gets kicked off by the fact that we're touching a safety energy lock. But also, never has a safety energy lock lain completely dormant until thou comest by and toucheth. No, oh well, never mind. Until we come by and touch it, you know. That's just not what happens. Is it best practice, second question, is it best practice to wait for a cycle to complete before moving to the next step? Or once started, does it complete on its own? I'm asking this because I remember you're saying in the main central class that if all we have time for is 3 breaths at each place, do that rather than skip the flow altogether. Maybe you will have already, sorry, no, that's the prologue to the third question that I started reading. So I actually think I answered this in the course, but it's very welcome to talk about it here. Is it best practice? Best practice is just a tiny bit too strong for me to say yes to that. So I guess it's a sort of yes. When we can, when time allows and it feels organic to hang around for the full cycle of transformation to be felt, hang around. When it feels like, this is moving along quite swiftly and I feel I don't need to be hanging in here, you can absolutely trust that the process of transformation will continue once you have left. So it's again this, what resonates with me, what feels right, what's moving me to not stay till the end of the transformative cycle. Is there some unrest that's moving me? Then stay and exhale right here. Or is it the feeling that, no, this is complete, it's okay, this knows how to take care of itself, I'll move on. And what I said in the main central class, I also say when people ask me, what do I do when time's up and I haven't quite finished my flow, but I really need to let the client go because they have a commitment or because I have another client? And I frequently say one option that I find very satisfying is to do the remaining steps of the flow with as little as one conscious exhalation per step. But what matters much more than the exhalation is I use the exhalation as a way, as a means to landing on the energy lock, and if possible in the energy lock with my perception right there and right then. So I know it hasn't been forgotten. It knows it hasn't been forgotten. It's just a very, very nice and smooth and organic way to round this off. Maybe you will already have answered the following question in answering the above. Does the transformation sequence always start with a third depth texture? For example, I will very often notice the first depth texture first, and I'm wondering, did I miss the first two, or am I misreading? Well, I haven't expressly answered the question, but I'm sure you have a pretty educated guess by now, or a firm conviction and understanding that since the process, as we said, is always going on, it is not rare and not unlikely that you may feel third depth first because the conversation is new. The transformative process, the energy lock was already in before you touched, could also be what you pick up on first, and then it's another one of those depths. A question you're not asking, but that I often do get asked is, does transformation always follow this order? And to that my answer is, in my experience, yes it does. However, the time spent on each stage is not equal. So, for those who are not familiar with pulse textures, in the beginning, when something has yet to come alive or is just barely coming alive this moment, you will feel very little, and then it gets stronger, the pulse gets stronger, and then it gets denser, and then it gets drier, and then it sort of whittles away. So, it stands to reason that it would always follow that curve. That's the order of transformation in very, very plain words and oversimplified, but that's why I think it tends to always follow that sequence, even if sometimes the loud passage is very quick and the next one lingers, or any of them could be quick or linger depending on what the need of the moment is. Needs and functions. In the fun lesson on remembering the order of organ function and energy with respect to the superficial and deep pulses in the fingers, you use the phrase ascending and descending needs and distinguish a need from a function. What's the difference between a need and a function in this context? Well, the need for the energy to descend is a given when energy is stuck above the waist, right? So that's literally what I mean by need. There's a need to bring the energy down if it's stuck above the waist. There's a need to bring the energy up if it's stuck below the waist. That's the need. It's obvious. Now, to satisfy that need, to satisfy the need for the energy to be brought down, you will almost always work with descending functions. You will use the descending functions to satisfy the descending need, with one notable exception in organ function energy. You use the diaphragm function to allow energy to go down. But diaphragm is an ascending function. It ascends from the chest to two fingers. Well, you could say it goes out. But in our terminology, because this is the posture of reference, we call it ascending and umbilicus descending, right? So it's out and in, but we call it ascending and descending. So diaphragm, while an ascending function, has such a strong impact of opening and clearing the middle that thereby it satisfies the need for the middle to be clear in a way that the energy can go down. So it's an ascending function that satisfies a descending need. I've defined need. Energy just needs to get down. Well, there's no better way to get the energy down on organ function energy level if all the descending flows are screaming and yelling for help. There's no better way to help all descending energy than by doing diaphragm. Mary used to underline that diaphragm starts with a D. Diaphragm down, help energy down with diaphragm D. Diaphragm with a D for down. And same for ascending needs, umbilicus with a U as in up. So to help all energy up when there's a need to get the energy up that's stuck below the waist, you can use the 5 ascending functions of the 5 physical depths, or you use umbilicus function energy, which, while it is descending, brings cosmic energy down into the physical body in such a way that its vibration rises, and when its vibration rises, its general energy level rises, then its ascending flows can also get up. So that's that difference made clear and practical. Thank you for the question. Off topic. In your book, pages 65 and 66, the book referenced is Building a Life, you have sections on thumb function energy and little finger function energy. What is so special about these? Meaning, why are these two important enough to have been included in your book? All the best. Well, Taj, it's not that they're that important necessarily, it's just that they fit the subject, because if you read on those pages what is said about the flows, thumb function energy is a combination of lung and large intestine flows, and little finger function energy is a combination of heart and small intestine function energies. So these are simple flows that combine a pair of organ flows into one simple application. Thumb function energy is a great second depth helper on the manifesting level. Little finger function is a great fifth depth helper on the manifesting level. Thumb function energy for both lung and large intestine functions, and little finger function energy for both heart and small intestine. Thank you for those questions. Karen writes, Dear Matthias, thank you for the 3rd month of videos and inspiration on reimagining the pulses. I particularly appreciate the analogies and stories you're weaving in, and I am happy I finally have a much clearer sense of the umbilicus diaphragm up-down conundrum, what we just discussed, right? I have 2 more practical pulse-related questions, and if there's time, another one that came up during a recent treatment. Regarding the pulses, first, I sometimes wonder if I'm feeling the blood pulse rather than the energetic pulse. Is there a way to avoid this potential confusion? Do I need to keep my finger a little more to the side of the wrist, perhaps? No, 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 no. Thank you for raising this question, Karen. No, no, no. What we learned in terms of finger placement is so crucial, you know, that falling onto that bone, rising onto the bone, falling off the bone into the groove. So being smack in that groove is so key to really feeling pulses. And that is then close to the blood vessel. So the reason I'm so happy you're asking this question is because many years ago I asked Mary almost exactly the same question. Not blood pulse, but I had heard in the classes I had attended, I think this was my 2nd 5-day class possibly, and I may have been 24 or something, or younger. Anyway, So I had understood that you can hear your heart pulse, the client's heart pulse, or this mysterious thing that Mary referred to as the rhythm of the universe. I used to think that was just a poetic way of saying pulse, but then in that class she pointed out, no, the rhythm of the universe has its own pulse. It beats at about 72 beats a minute, and it's constant and impersonal. Okay, you say so. So I asked her. I understand there are these 3 pulsations. I may be feeling my own heart pulse, which I may not be skilled enough to distinguish from the person's heart pulse, and I may have no experience just yet of the rhythm of the universe. How do I know? And Mary, in this wonderful, unique way of hers, without flinching, said, there is only one pulse. I can't tell you how liberating these answers that sounded like non-answers to so many people were to me. Because what she was saying, or what my being immediately translated that into, was, dude, you will never have to worry about this question again. You know, my being was probably translating it much more into, dear, truly, literally, you know, it felt so embracing, this thing of, oh, but don't you realize the pulse that you are feeling, and on the basis of which you will be feeling transformation, that's the pulse you are meant to hear. It's the transformation in the pulses that matters anyway. So if you're hearing changes, if you're hearing textures and all of these wonderful things, just go with the pulse you're feeling them in. This is my translation of it, but all Mary said was, there is only one pulse. So the only conclusion I possibly can draw from that is, all right, if there's only one pulse, as she says, then this must be the pulse I'm supposed to hear. I find it so liberating. And I haven't looked back since. I have never since that day questioned whether the pulse I was hearing was the pulse I was supposed to hear. I've known that it is. Thanks in the name of everyone out there for asking this, bringing this up. Second, is it correct to say that I'm reading the superficial pulses more with the pad of my top finger joint and the deep pulses more with the tip of my top finger joint? No. Another no. And by the way, I don't think you mean joint, you mean the digit, right? That part above the joint, right? But no, it's the same part of the finger that stays when you roll into the deep pulses. It's the part of the finger that's listening doesn't change, the pressure doesn't change, the angle changes slightly. So yeah, it's still the same part of the finger, just placed at a slightly different angle. That's another curiously easy thing to settle into once you relax into the practice. It's so amazing that almost nothing changes, and yet what you perceive is generally very noticeably different. No added pressure, of course, but you know that. I'm just throwing it in for everyone else. As to my third question, quite often, while offering jiu-jitsu sessions, I find myself getting a palpable sense of when the client's nervous system settles, and a space of deeper relaxation seems to open up. Although a similar quietening down happened during this treatment in question, I also found myself repeatedly checking in with my client, mostly non-verbally, with some perplexity, wondering if they were relaxing or if something else was going on. Their breath was relatively shallow, and they felt almost a little immobilized, though at the same time pointing out to me that certain holds felt really good. Following the session, they mentioned feeling somewhat challenged at times with her breathing, and having a lot of things coming up for them during the treatment. All of this made me wonder retrospectively if they had gone into some degree of a freeze or fawn response. as frequently associated with anyone holding trauma in their system. Is this something you might be able to speak on from your own experience? And if so, are there any recommendations you might have in this respect? Well, Karen, you did exactly what I would have recommended. You had a sense that you should check in with them. You had a sense to check in with them non-verbally mostly. When you feel alerted in that way and it's not making you nervous, then I would trust that it's the process, so it's the other person and their needs in the moment, combined with your sensitivity, that's calling upon you, gently directing you to create the kind of safety and comfort it creates. When somebody who already trusts you, who you already trust, when somebody whom you already trust to hold space for you, nonetheless checks with you whether you're okay, like some frightened child. So was some old held trauma pattern coming up? Possibly. But would there have been a different way? Would there have been anything you would have needed to know? I really don't think so. I really don't think so. It seems like what occurred in the situation is perfect. And often not naming and certainly not pathologizing any trauma that may have been held. In other words, not going somber and saying, oh, was that hard for you, is preferable. You know, it's preferable not to go to those dark places. Instead, what you can do is say, well, how did it feel? You know, again, inviting them into saying, a lot came up. What was the flavor of it? You could ask first, are you fine with just being with that and traveling home with it? Or shall we investigate that a little further? Can you remember what it felt like? Where are you at with it right now? Those kinds of questions can be helpful as long as they're not focused on interpretation. Oh, I think it's that time in my childhood when, unless of course you're trained to do that kind of work, but it's a very different kettle of fish. So to just go into the, what was the flavor of that? The sensation of that will take the person into a place that's almost always very, very manageable, because it's not story linked, it's just something they experienced. So there was sensation, there was a person having the sensation. That's not an unsafe thing. Yeah? That's not being in a different place than right here, or in a different time than right now. So, is that a very clear answer? As while I do think that may be involved, I still think what happened was very safe and very well done. I guess it's a short one. Thank you, Karen. Michael sends tonight's last question. Hello, Matthias. I think of the invitation to await some fresh experience of the pulse when trading with my long-term Jin-Jitsu friend Joe. I can't remember the specifics, but it did lead to a very unique session without discussing paths of memories previously unvisited. Thank you for sharing that. That's just what listening does. It makes things true listening, disinterested listening, not prying. It's what that does. It invites things to the surface with no drama or big deal that feel, since there is a calm and composed listening space, I guess this is the time I can come up. And they do. I continue on my approach path to letting go of my position of over 30 years at the hospital. Waves of irritation, bluesiness, and lostness are fairly understandable visitors. They come in quiet ways that I have to be attentive to notice as likely related to this major change. I long for a full-on bout of tears like a thunderstorm of cleansing which, like our local weather, refuses to come. I have some kind of tenderness and feel of collapse in my inside right arch and ankle, teamed up with a spasm in my right gluteus muscles, related tensions in my right jaw and knee, similar to my moods. It all comes quietly, only noticeable at times, but fairly persistently. A right side symphony. This is really quite magical, or, of course, coincidental. I'll get into why in a minute. I have done self-care with 15s to invite physical healing, and 16s to invite some buoyancy and taking a next step energy to my right arch. Just last night I worked through 5, 6, 7, 8 sequences and quickies on both sides, which felt like it got me down among the energies that seem somewhat mired. Bingo. I am both hoping for some kind of release into feeling and more active unpacking of my responses to my major life change, and feeling patient that this process can find its way as I find ways to support it. So maybe I'm practicing a similar kind of open listening to your recommended approach to the pulses. Thanks for listening, and any thoughts are welcome. Well, the part that I just called magical, Michael, is that today, this afternoon, I was recording the content for the German online study circle for the month of July. In the morning, I was recording the English content. But the content this afternoon for the German online study circle, where we've been inquiring into the movement apparatus of our body since April, was the foot. Not what do you do for foot problems, but what lives in a foot? What's in a foot? What do we find out when, what's already moving in a foot when we are not yet actively moving our feet or foot? And so I'll share with you a feeling exercise that I recorded today, where you rest your foot. You know, I have mine up on the sofa right now, and that's a good start if you can comfortably do that. But on the floor will do if this is not comfortable. And feel into the foot, the structure, the volume, relaxing the foot, but feeling into bringing your sensory awareness inside the foot, the whole job, the whole foot. And as you tune into that, keenly observe what's happening in your body, what's happening in your mind, your energy, in the general way you feel. And so I don't want to make this too long, and as long as it is in the guided exercise for the study circle, they have the German one for next month. But pretty soon, I think, as you pursue this, you will feel that the foot, when you're not feeling into the foot functioning, when you're not feeling into the foot doing something, when you're not feeling into the foot being useful for something, but instead, if you feel into the foot being a foot, there will be a sense of, you said it, buoyancy. There will be something that lifts you. There will be both an energy of landing more fully and more decisively in what's here right now and who you are right now and how you are here right now. You can take, the exercise foot placed on the sofa to both feet placed on the ground. If you feel that both feet are very much activated, stand up. And again, rather than feeling into the feet doing something or being useful for now carrying your weight, let that be something that just happens by the way. Let that just be a side occurrence. While the foot being a foot is still the main attraction. And then take that to walking. So that's the full feeling exercise. And you will feel that there is such aliveness, both in positioning yourself on the ground, connecting to the physicality of existence, connecting to the physicality of the earth and of the body. And much more than that, and this you will probably want to feel before you start walking, there's also a curiosity of mind, is it? Or body? Or senses? There's a curiosity on the part of your feet to hear what the ground is responding, what the earth is responding, what the body is handing back in terms of information, often non-verbal information, sensory information, vibratory information. So that curiosity, I think, is something you already aimed at with the self-help you mentioned, and the 5, 6, 7, 8 that got you down with the energies that have been somewhat mired confirms that. And this feeling exercise will really bring a relief for the tensions you have mentioned. But really, everything I've described about that so fits the situation that you find yourself in. You know, it's like, to really land in this and fathom it and feel the buoyancy of it and the breadth of it and the aliveness of it and the space that takes in your life, and keenly listening to what may be coming up. And with that, it may not be all that dramatic, what's needed and what's happening, and maybe, you know, a full thunderstorm of thunder shower of tears would be lovely and freeing. Maybe not. Maybe it's not needed. Or it will come as a very gentle trickle of tears of gratitude. Who knows? Who knows? You know, but to like put it out of your mind that it would be better if it were any particular kind of reaction, and instead feel this interesting mix of such strength and aliveness and resilience and selfness in the feet. You know, the feet saying, more than anything else, we are feet. Yes, we also carry you, by the way, but more than anything, we are this first connection of aliveness to the earth, you know, being, having landed in existence. A wonderful exercise. So there may be other people on this call whose appetite's been whet to or is it wetted? To trying this exercise. And we're perfectly on time here. It's even a minute before 9, so we'll finish on time this evening, or 1 minute early to make up for all the times we went over by a few minutes. So thank you all for being here. Any listener, any spectator who would like to find out more about my online offerings, current and upcoming and past, you can go to the links on this page. I have online offerings in German, in English and in French. And the corresponding links are all there. MatthiasJSJ.de is my website, where you can also sign up for my newsletter. You can sign up for the newsletter also on those other pages listed below. It all takes you to the same form. If you are at MatthiasJSJ.de, make sure to choose English from the drop-down menu if you want to sign up for the newsletter in English. Otherwise, you'll be signed up for the newsletter of whatever language is showing up there. I send newsletters in English, in German, and in French. Have a lovely evening.